Right, you lot. So I've hinted once or twice about some of the fittings that are going to be amongst my freshwater system. And the key components are going to be, of course, a pump that brings water up from the bottom of this water tank here, and then a filtration system, and then some form of tap, faucet, outlet of some type that they can then bring water through up to the top, where we can fill up pans and glasses and bottles and all sorts of things like that. I've obviously uninstalled the countertop right now so I can get access to this working area, because I like it to be all neatly hidden down beneath it. And the big change that I'm going to be making is that this was the original pump that I was going for. I think I sort of very, very briefly alluded to it in a previous episode. This is actually just a sort of standard diaphragm bilge pump. I wanted reasonably high flow. This was good value for money, German built. So I just thought this will do the job. I'm actually going to relegate this now to actual emergency bilge emptying duty, because the diameters of the fittings are a bit of a pain, and I've got plenty of reducers and stuff, but anyway, it's just a bit of a pain. But also finding a mounting location. Can't really go here because this bit is slightly flexible. I can't mount it up here because that will get in the way of the countertop. I don't want to mount anything directly onto the water tank, because that needs to be mobile, and also bonding anything or strapping anything to polyethylene is a pain. I can't have it here because then it will bash the bottom of the worktop as well. This is actually just not particularly well suited, so that goes on the tomorrow pile. Steady yourselves. I know it was a high-risk endeavour to begin today's Alan episode with me speaking to camera, but voiceover Alex is back to retake control. Real Alex is relegated to carrying a heavy anchor and chain from one end of the boat to another. I don't think we've been down into this sort of mini bilge area right at the bow of Alan since I think probably the very, very earliest episodes. So very, very excitingly, I'm going to be doing a little bit of work down here this time round. And it's actually where my anchor, chain and rope has lived in a sort of a flexi bucket since the early days. And I've also put down a sort of like a mini false floor before, but I'm going to sort of elaborate on that and improve the system, but also because the anchor is going to have a new home, because I have other ideas for how I can use this area more effectively, because at the moment it's really not making the best use of my volume and the space in here. By making use of the area, I mean three things really. A small storage zone, then if I can find one to fit, a small diesel generator, and finally a step over the top to enhance Alan's currently mediocre bow hatch ingress and egress potential. But this tiny section right down the bottom is useful for nothing except ballast, and most weight so far has been installed towards the stern. I'm packing some loose rag and tape around the bottommost through bolt that holds the old davit structure securely into the hull. I don't think that it would be good practice to leave it defenceless against what is to come. Lead is to come. I received offcuts and some spare sheeting from family, and I'm going to use this as a core for this ballasting operation. I used scrap steel before, mainly for reasons of availability and cost. As we all know, lead is very easy to cut, hammer, and indeed stamp into shape. It's just best that you don't grate it over your breakfast cereal or inhale clouds of its dust. Instant death sidestep once more, I was quite satisfied by my efforts swiftly cutting, rolling, and crushing nuggets of lead to fit into the bow. Not to mention the physical exercise, free of charge, deployed on this larger chunk. I know that molten lead pouring maximises density when using it as ballast, but I'd need to armour the fiberglass against the heat, and so that's not going to happen. Instead, I indulge my 3D geometric puzzle-solving addiction, which I most certainly do not have in any way, and we can move on to the next stage. Clearly, it all needs to be encased in cement. I would have used a different method, but the lack of cement in Alan's episodes recently, according to this comment, needed to be remedied. Don't say I never take your input seriously. I'm making sure the level isn't too high, as that would waste space, and I'm not going to bother with the self-levelling topping. I'll see how flat I can get it with the tool on the final pour. More pressing is to get the moisture levels right. I hear it's possible to really mess that up. The anti-glooping strategy was a triumph, bolts still accessible, but I needed more ballast, yet had no more lead. I knew that all these offcuts of steel were going to come in handy at some point, and so they're going to be separated from the plastic and taken inside. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why you don't forget to use a proper microphone when it's windy. But he was speaking the truth. These chicken farm steel offcuts are ideal and just need to be deplasticked first. They are destined for 2 small triangles either side of the water tank socket. Currently they are a mixture of foam and void underneath a fairly shoddy waterproof matting extension. We can do better, and it's probably the last place I can position a few dozen kilos of metal right down low. Minor excavation work takes mere moments, and I can then work out where all the various lengths of steel can fit in. A bucket more cement later, and we have 2 neatly entombed ballast lumps, although I had a thought. I put the water tank into its slot here because I just want to make sure that as that concrete sets, the weight doesn't sort of pressure inward on where the tank sits, and it would be a disaster if I ended up with like a half-inch pinch at the bottom, which then means that this won't be able to seat properly. So yeah, I think this is a good thing to do. And now I can just wait for the concrete to set. And by concrete, I mean metal-filled cement, because it's not concrete. As it turned out, no aggregate was harmed in the formation of these ballast blocks. Yes, you really are watching cement dry on YouTube. What a time to become a Wonderment member. We should probably move on to this. I'm leaving this protective film on for now. This is obviously the thinner backing board. This is the much thicker working board for the galley. And I'm now going to mark on 2 things. The first one, where I'm going to put the hinges for this board to be mounted on. That will then go through the box section steel that's behind here. And I'm also going to mark on where here and here I will be able to curve off the corners, because I want to match the extent that the water tank sticks out into the walkway, and so this doesn't stick out any further than the tank, and then that means that we won't have people sort of bumping their hips and thighs against this as they go around the corner. I readied myself for some serious drilling, and even though this was only mild steel and not harder stainless, thought I'd try out some old drill bits that I'd hand resharpened with a grinder. Even though I just did them quickly by eye, I'm chuffed, like a knife through butter. The hinges are mounted into the racking on the vertical, so are rock solid, and I just want to make sure the Perspex worktop, that's much thicker than the backing panel, is properly supported. I think I should be able to get away with only a pair of hinges, and more weight will be supported on the opposite edge, onto the water tank's top side. I'm guessing a trio of rubber padded wooden supports. I also had to fit the hinges back to front, because through their design this is the only way I can fully rotate the work surface up and back to meet the racking. We'll need easy access to the water tank, including on the occasions the whole thing needs to come out for cleaning or maintenance. The sharp corners of course need sorting. You lot thought I was going to use an angle grinder. I wonder why a jigsaw snaking along, its blade zooming up and down in an ethereal blur, doesn't seem to garner the same emotional response from the masses. And that worktop can be remounted later. What do you guys and girls suggest for an edge to it to stop things rolling off? Preferably easily removable and remountable. Trigger warning. A reminder of the pump I've unceremoniously sacked. I'm trying a different one. Plus, all the plumbing needs doing. What I do actually have over there is a box of spares, things which I bought ages ago which I've not really needed yet. And here is a different sort of manual pump. This is a standard whale. It's supposed to be a foot pump, but actually it's quite easy just to do with your hand like that. This is what I'm going to use. The outlet diameters are a lot more workable as well. That's not quite as enormous as that one. So this I'm actually going to have mounted on top. I say not mounted, sorry. Just put on top on a rubber pad on top of here. It'll sit underneath the worktop, so that when you want to pump water up to the tap, you simply put your hand underneath the worktop and just go. And I think that will do us a really good job. So I'm now going to work out all the different diameters of tubes, because nothing's quite the same. There's some 13mm, some 15mm, some 17mm, because we're having 2 types of filter. The first type of filter is going to be a basic sediment filter, really basic one with a big net in basically. And then the second one is a lot more elaborate. This is a carbon block filter, and this will stop odours and the taste of the disinfectant that we're going to go for. Probably going to go with the straightforward chlorine after all the help that you guys gave me in a previous episode. I've investigated. There were some great ideas, but I want one with no electrical power needed, and I want it to be easy to maintain. Apparently these carbon block filters are really good at both cleaning other nasties out of the water, like heavy metals, but in particular they get rid of chlorine and the taste and the smell, so that you can enjoy the water that you're drinking and cooking with. Right, I'll put it all together. I got on with all the connections and lengths of flexible clear PVC tube. I've gone with that sort of hose as it's flexy but not too flexy, and means I can visually inspect for blockages or any nastiness growing inside. So lots of reducers and single ear stainless O-clips. Although not able to be reused, they are apparently much more circular than screw action hose clamps, and circular is apparently useful to avoid leaks. The new pump, still on probation, can join the whole assembly, and I'm working out the layout. A through tank fitting at the back right, then a length to the front left for the hand pump, and then back to the rear panel where I can mount the filter. The supply hose can finally loop around up to the top. And yes, more hose connections and clips. A couple of the fits were tight, or rather nearly impossible, so I used the heat gun to persuade them on. A kettle and hot water is better, but I was being lazy. The whole thing needed a wet test, which is apparently more helpful than a dry test. I'm only giving the pump about a foot or so of elevation above the inlet end held underwater in the bucket, and also above the filter and the outlet. This should test whether a pump designed for low down foot action has the ability to draw water up fast enough to refill the diaphragm and not ruin all of our days. Not very encouraging. There's flow, and after a few pumps most trapped air is gone, but there's a problem somewhere, and this is nowhere near the head of water it'll need to deal with aboard Allen. The filter isn't rated to process a vast number of litres per minute, but it can deal with more than 3 bar of pressure. I tried taking off the inlet elbow and the first reducer to see if there's a bore restriction that's the problem. It does make a minor difference, but not enough to be the culprit. I can tell that the drama is still down to the pump not refilling easily, dragging its feet. Ironic for a foot pump. One and all, I think we may need to get electricity involved, which is a blow. You can ruminate over this gloomy news whilst watching water dribble out of my filter, before heading to the link in the description about how to assist Team Allen via membership, books, and merch. Bye.